Hello, darlings. Micah Wright here. This episode, I present to you the conversation I had with Caitlin Cordell, who is a magical, witchy tattoo artist who lives in Twisp, Washington, small community on a river. I know Caitlin through the internet. Caitlin tattoos in kind of a fine line, black and gray style, mostly plants and animals. I knew that we would have an amazing conversation because Caitlin oftentimes posts stories on social media that really resonate with me. And of course, the tattoos Caitlin posts are absolutely gorgeous. Hear us talk about things about being in tattoo community, being older tattoo artists, working with youth, appreciating youth, being support for youth, and intergenerational love, intergenerational connection, and also relationships across political lines, belief lines, value lines, and rural life versus urban life for queers. It's really a beautiful conversation, and Caitlin has the most infectious laugh. So here we go. Hi, Caitlin.
Hi, Micah.
Why don't we start by you just giving me some identity markers that are important to you that you would like the audience to know about you?
Okay. So Caitlin Cordell, I use she, her pronouns. I don't identify as cisgender, just like gender non-conforming feels like the right one. I'm white. I live in rural Eastern Washington, but I grew up in Seattle. And come from, Pacific Northwest educators and teachers. And definitely identify as queer. I have a partner. We have 2 cats and an artist and a social worker, both of those things, youth worker. So
I know that you transitioned. Sorry to interrupt. I know you transitioned from social work to tattooing. How long has it been since that transition happened?
I did that in September. I turned 40 and I had been doing youth work for close to 20 years, 25 years. And it just felt like this time in my life was time to give space to the artist that had not gotten a lot of attention.
I feel like I've been seeing your tattoos much longer than 4 months. Mm-hmm. So were you doing that at the same time?
Yeah. I was doing that pretty part-time. I started tattooing or teaching myself hand poke tattoo in 2018, and then transitioned to mostly machine tattooing in 2022 with support from a mentor. And then, was doing that, working 2 days a week tattooing and 4 days a week doing social work. Yeah.
And since you live rurally, how does that work with social work agencies and also tattooing? Are you near a big town? Where do you do all kinds of work out of?
Yeah, I'll try to paint the picture of where I am. So, I'm actually I'm in central Eastern Washington, and I'm in a valley called the Methow Valley, which is named after the indigenous people that were here before white colonizers. And some of them still do live in this valley, but many of them have been displaced and now belong to the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation, which is 12 tribes. And it is a valley of like 3, 4 small towns. And they kind of become progressively more affluent as you get further north. And it's a tourist center in Okanagan County. It's like truly one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. It's like, Land Before Time, when like he comes out and there's the valley there, like sometimes when I'm driving, I feel like I'm in the Land Before Time. It's like green hills and then the river flows through it. And then there's White Mountains, there's the Cascades that kind of hug us in here. And the town that I'm in called Twisp, which is a Methow word for pollinator. I think it's for yellow jacket, is like 3,000, 4,000 people. And I'm in the unincorporated part. So, but it's pretty affluent. It's got a lot of second homeowners, and they kind of help this economy. I mean, help is a really interesting word, but they feed money into the economy, the tourist economy here. And there's a lot of local working people that are really supported by other working people and people who care about this community. And there's a really fantastic nonprofit organization called Room One. That's where I was working for many years. And we actually my job focused primarily on sexual health, violence prevention work in the schools, but also around Okanagan County. And then there's just like a ton of other nonprofits in the area that like support people here and bring in money to support the nonprofit. So surprisingly, there's a lot of people that really resonate with, I mean, not surprisingly, but like flora, fauna, fine line tattoos. And a lot of my clients are like 50 plus first tattoo people that just were like, oh, I didn't know you could get a tattoo that was of a fireweed illustrative style. They have a very different perspective on tattoo art and what it means. And so I have a lot of those clients. So surprisingly, I have a lot of clients and I feel like I've got great work here, which is amazing.
That is amazing. And I love that. I think, when you live in a big, like urban area like I do, and there's tattoo artists here, and that sometimes it just feels like I'm just like clawing my way through this like oversaturated field of like there's just so many options for people, and like yes, I have enough clients, but like is that always going to be the case? Like am I still relevant? I'm 40, there's just like a lot of these things, and I'm like, what if I go somewhere more rural, because that's what I really would like to do, and like would that still work?
Yeah, what makes you want to go more rural?
I mean the hustle here is a lot, and I miss weather. Like I mean I think I'd like to go towards the East Coast because I miss changes in weather. I miss living in seasons. It's quite sad here. And primarily it's like all the driving, it's just the energy here is so intense, and I'm just closer and closer to being like I can't do this anymore.
Totally. Yeah. I think that's very much where I was at when I was living in Seattle, was like driving and the hustle and just feeling like all your time was dedicated to like working your job and driving to your job, and then trying to fit in outside of that, the time to do things that felt rejuvenating or connecting to place and culture and community. So yeah, I'm with you on that too. And there's a lot of challenges to living rurally.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's not, it's like I'm definitely not like, oh, this, city person being like, it's so easy. Like, I know it's not. I know, but there's you trade something for something else. Like, there's pluses and minuses to everything. When did you transition from being in Seattle to being like out in Twisp area?
Yeah, we moved in 2018 out here. And it's a little bit of a boom space. There's a lot of interest in living out here from people on the west side in the Seattle and the I-5 corridor. A lot of people visit here, and want to live here full time or have parents that have second homes out here and that kind of thing. So it was pretty amazing that we were able to find this place. It is unique. We live in a post and pier yurt, so it's got walls, but it's very much a like it doesn't have a foundation. It feels more like a cabin, and it's on shared land. So we live with two other families here and uh, share. It's like 13 acres. That's a conservation easement, so it's not able to be developed. It's zoned for farming. We live with a seed farmer. Um, so it was really interesting. We had to like be vetted and voted on to come and live in this place from our community. And I was totally like a city mouse. Like I was super naive about what it meant to live rurally. But my partner Easton, she grew up in Montana, and so she kind of had more understanding, like knows what irrigation means. I had no idea what irrigation was, or like when and how to cut firewood, and yeah, just like tons of other stuff that have to do with living out here.
Okay, what's the biggest, most drastic like thing that you were like, oh my God, this is something I wish I'd known before?
Gosh, what's something I wish I had known? I I think it's like a mentality. When you live in a city, there are so many people that um, you can call on to help you do the things that you don't know how to do. So, like plumbing, electrical work, fixing a thing on your house, or whatever that is. And out here, there's so fewer people, and uh, a lot of them are tapped by the various more like higher class people, and they can pay more money for it. So just having that mindset of like you're going to have to do most of this yourself, and like that means a lot of YouTube videos and a lot of time, and having patience and reading manuals. Like I never read a manual before. Like you plug it in and it works, and then you hope it keeps working. And if it doesn't, you call somebody to come fix it. And it's like if your dishwasher doesn't work, you got to fix your dishwasher. And that's been awesome. Like I feel very empowered by that, but it's also definitely been a shocker and super humbling too. Like my perspective on rural people and community and ways of being in America has definitely shifted from what it was like for me living in Seattle.
That makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense. The
Yeah.
perspective shifting, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
How is community wise? Sounds like you have quite a big community there. Are there a lot of queer folks around you?
There is actually a really interesting, like older queer community here. So like a lot of older lesbians that like both, they moved here early on and kind of built some of the like community nonprofits and like social movements in this valley, which has been really neat to get to know like an elder lesbian community that I didn't have a lot of connection to elders when I was in Seattle, but that has been really powerful here. And then I would say more like queer, trans, and non binary people have been moving to the valley, probably a very similar time frame that Easton and I moved here. Um, and those folks, it seems like, yeah, really are queer people that found that their nervous systems were just way more supported by living in a rural valley. Like the stimulation of cities was not supportive of that. And so, and that's true of a lot of people out here too. They're just like wanting out of the hustle of city life. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's small, but it's present. It is very present here, and like we have a thrive. I mean, we have a pretty thriving pride here. The community really shows up. We have a small organization called Manhow Valley Pride, and they are trying to do more work around here. Our schools support gender non-binary young people. I work at an alternative high school, and I would say like probably a third of the students there would identify as either gay, lesbian, or gender queer, non-binary, trans.
It's definitely where the young ones are going. I mean, I always said that, as I was like in my 20s, and one of the people were just like, gender what, and I was a gender
Yeah,
studies major. But I was like,
yeah,
if people thought about their gender for a second, they would realize there's as many genders as there are people, and you can't just like categorize us into two different categories and be done with it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
people actually realize it because they're thinking about gender more.
They are, and they're just like they're thinking about their gender. I think in ways beyond that is just like expansive of even the box, of like even thinking that masculine to feminine are the edges. They're like, no, that's like not even the edge I care about. Like, like I have people here who really they're much more interested in sort of eco-regional like queerness in nature or queerness in animals, and so like that edge is being pushed, or in like bioregion queerness, like how does our gender become connected to place. So that's been really neat about being here, is that kind of exploration beyond human social constructs.
You mentioned the alternative high school that you work at, and those kids, like, what's the alternative piece? How is it structured? That's different. I'm like happy to hear that's happening in like more rural areas too.
Yeah, it's like I've always worked with alternative high schools, and I like grew up going to alternative schools, so they're very much my people. This school specifically, it's called a big picture school, and that means that they mostly set their own project deliverables, and then they do a lot of work and internships that are connected to goals that they have. So young people, like I've mentored a lot of young people. I just did a seminar with 3 young people on hand poking. Like, how do you do it safely? Like, here's some of the like things that you would want to think about when you create a design. How do we work with stippled texture, that kind of thing? And that's part of their learning plan. So they come to me for 4 weeks. I do a class, and then they just give a presentation that kind of tells you and like both the mentors and their teachers how they met some of these deliverables. Some of them do like crazy cool things like metal work, or working at a vet's office, or teaching themselves how to crochet. Like, it doesn't matter. It's a really beautiful culture, very supportive. And you just see young people go from like struggling to majorly thriving over the course of like 2 to 3 years, their time there. And it's special for a rural place to have that, for sure.
Do you feel like you're like a village witch? Like you're like a one of the like village healers that people come to for like
Oh, Mike, I love that term so much. In a
like
way,
old school kind of sense, like when you get to be that age where like people send their young people to you and like you do like healing rituals for them and that kind of thing.
mm-hmm. It's so lovely that you captured that idea, because like some of the work that I do with young people is also around tarot. So tarot has really been an important healing modality for me for the last couple of years, and I'm actually working on this tarot deck that I've been trying to publish for 5 years. And so I do these classes with young people, and they're focused primarily on self-defense and like violence prevention, but then we explore identity, and we explore like development and coping mechanisms to deal with stress. And every year I always do a tarot workshop. And I'll bring in other people from the community to do tarot readings with them too, and like set it up for them. And it is kind of their favorite piece of it. And I've done mentorship with young people around tarot reading too. So, I would say there is sort of a village witch orientation in that, of like working with young people. And I like identify with young people pretty majorly, feel more comfortable than sometimes I do with adults.
Have you always been like the big sibling, kind of like as your role in life? Like it sounds like you worked with kids for a long time. So have you always placed yourself like in kind of a young mentor type of positions?
Yeah, that's a pretty apt observation. Yeah, I'm an older sister to a younger brother who struggled pretty deeply and loved being an older sibling to him and his friends, and um, started doing camp counseling and youth work basically since the age of 13. So youth
Mhm.
work and mentorship has been a huge part. And I'm a Virgo, so I just love teaching. I'm a Leo rising, so I like being at the center of attention and making people feel really good. And I have a Cancer moon, so I'm also very sensitive. Oriented.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're like we're the same age? I'll be 40 in the month.
Oh,
Do you-
congratulations.
Oh, thank you. I guess it's yeah, right. Instead that's a I like congratulations instead of happy birthday. Like you made it to some
You
next
did.
age. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's we all make it anywhere really.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but do you feel like you're an elder now? Do you still feel like how do I've just been thinking about that lately. Like, do I
Yeah.
feel becoming an elder because my I have my first apprentice and she's 23 and
Yeah.
I feel very connected to her and also very much older than her. And it's an
Yeah.
interesting thing to be for really the first time in my life, the older one, not the younger one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I have a few questions I'd love to like turn around on that because I also think there's some interesting things around age in tattoo industry and culture that I'm not as familiar with, but I've been observing. Um, yeah, so elder is such an interesting word. The young people I work with don't see me as being 40. They deny that I am 40 most of the time, which I take as a compliment, but it's also been very consistent through my life that people don't see me as old as I am. And so I feel like I have sort of a young energy. And so connecting with young people, um, I don't feel older. And I also don't love being um, both perceived and acting like somebody who is older. Because I think there can be a tendency as we become older to kind of do this distancing culturally with generations younger than us, like, oh, I don't understand that, or oh, kids these days kind of attitude. And I find like young people's culture and passion and criticism of systems in the world to be really interesting and engaging. And so I don't want to separate myself from that. Um, so I don't know yet that I find myself feeling like an elder. And I just have so many elders in my life that I was like, oh, you've lived, like you are an elder, that I still feel so much, I still feel so young in some ways and like growing. But um yeah, and so I that question for you about like feeling like an elder, particularly, how long have you been tattooing for, Micah?
15 years.
Okay, so you've been tattooing for a while, and like how have you seen that? Has there been a shift for you and how you see yourself, or that how other people see you as you get older and tattooing?
I mean, there's so many layers to that question and answer.
Mm-hmm.
I see the trends shifting. Like when I started, it was still the age of, and different areas are different too, but in the Bay Area, there was still the age of walk in shop culture. There's stuff on the walls that you can pick from. And when
Yeah.
I started, I did some of that stuff. And then very quickly as I started, and I was at a very popular shop, like a very popular walk-in shop in the
Mm-hmm.
city in San Francisco. Very quickly we took that stuff off the walls because people wanted custom work. And that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of like where it began to be, and people still looked at like books on the tables. They would still look at photo books, but
Mm-hmm.
then it became Instagram, right? And so I went
Mm-hmm.
from big busy shop, smaller quieter shop, private studio, all because of Instagram, because people started looking for tattoo artists online instead of walking
Yeah.
in the shop, so I could have a private studio and like be fine. And then I felt really like in the prime of it,
Mm-hmm.
and like people weren't doing like watercolor stuff, and I started to do it because I was interested in, just expanding, like pushing the bounds of what a tattoo was,
Yeah.
and pushing the bounds of what like the older dudes would say was okay to do, you know. And so I started doing that work, and then it became very popular. A lot of people started doing it, and now we're back to like stickery looking, like line worky, small pieces, a lot of like flash, a lot of
Mm.
sleeves,
Mm-hmm.
back to that like 90s pokey, what we used to call tribal. We don't call that now.
Uh-huh.
Call it now sigilism. They call it neo sigilism or something. But
Sigilism.
these,
Uh-huh.
these like pokey looking black designs people put in their lower backs and stuff, like the shit that I've covered up so
Mm-hmm.
much over the last 15 years. So in that way, I have that like, oh my God, the young people are doing this thing again.
Yeah.
um, but I think it's interesting what you said about, having that attitude towards young people and youth and their trends and their culture. It's like separating ourselves from it. And I think we would do it because of feeling defensive. Like I feel,
Mm.
or like feeling insecure. Like,
Mm-hmm.
are we still relevant? Do they still care?
Mm.
Like, the youth don't realize how much power they have
Mm.
in culture and in acceptance, and like in who gets a bigger slice of the pie, like who gets more followers or more whatever. That's now how the pie, I feel like, is looking like, is like
Mm.
a lot of online attention and followings, which
Mm-hmm.
I've never been able to achieve much of.
Mm-hmm.
My clientele is I feel like my clientele is kind of similar. It's a lot of middle-aged women who kind of wake up one day and go, I've given so much of my life to like my husband, my kids, and
Mm.
now I have a bit more space in my life and I have a bit more disposable income, and I'm going to go do something for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like a lot of my clientele is that type of
Mm-hmm.
person. Not all, I have a lot
Mm-hmm.
of young queer folks too. And, um, but then I see like who Sailor is getting as an apprentice, what her clientele is like. And she's like, she's very into her like alternative music culture. And like, she's got a big piercing in her nose and like eyebrow piercings. And she looks very cool. She wears giant
Yeah.
clothes, Billie Eilish style giant clothes. And
I love that that's the trend right now. It's awesome. It's so great.
totally agree. I love it too. And it also makes me, because I have a very like familial feeling around her, it makes me feel like safer for her, like in this
Mm-hmm.
weird, like, remember in the 90s when we had to show our entire torso from like here to here, because that was the
Mm.
trend. I didn't do that, but that was the trend.
I couldn't either, but yes.
Yeah. But I'm
Mhm.
like, she's covered up. I love that. I love that. That,
Oh, yeah.
she's not getting like attention well, she is still getting that attention.
Yeah.
Like a girl dad. This is the thing. I'm just like, I want to like sit on the porch with my gun, being like, anybody come near my kid, I'm gonna shoot them. I feel it inside, very deep inside.
And I think that's like beautiful too, to have, I imagine that you're not like pedantic or like minimizing in that love and kind of,
I try. I try to
yeah,
check in with I try to be like, is this okay?
yeah.
Are your are your boundaries good? And like, and we'll check in about it. So it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we'll joke a lot about it. She calls me grandpa. So, it's like I think about age a lot in this context because I agree with what you said. It's like I also don't want to separate myself, but I also feel like
Mm.
I have to position myself somewhere where I can like kind of observe, be part of it, but not cross boundaries, and like,
Yeah.
but still we all want to remain relevant, right? And
Mm.
like the culture moves so fast and trends move
Mm-hmm.
so fast. I'm not going to go back to what I thought of in the 90s was like not that interesting of tattoo work and do that now because it's the
Yeah.
trend. Like I'm still going to do my thing,
Yeah.
but like, at some point, is that going to be completely not what anybody wants? Like it's scary,
Mm. Yeah, I think when you were just talking, I was thinking about, I've definitely felt influenced by trends, and you'll see clients who are interested. I think that's like the biggest thing is you see clients introduced by trends. So they bring some of these ideas to you. And I was just reflecting, like, I don't even know if I could if I wanted to, in some ways, like change my style, because it's like, so I've been drawing since I could, and that is like how I draw. And I don't even know if I could do, I don't think I could ever do what you do. Like, I just, my concept of color, could maybe work really, really hard, but your composition, your creativity, the way that you think about those things together, if that was the trend, I couldn't do it.
Mm.
But I do think that there's something really interesting about tattoo art, which is also like deeply part of the relationship that we build with people in community. And I think I've heard you talk about that on your podcast, about how, you still have this client base, that it feels okay. And I imagine part of that is just that, like, you, both the color and the vibrancy and the interest that your designs bring for people, those are the people that gravitate towards you. And like, I'll do black and gray, delicate floral work, with, and I like to play, but people also in my community like spending time with me, that's part of the draw, is like, there is a comfort that we create together, and so they want to come back time and time again to get tattoos.
It's that village wish thing, like
Totally.
that person is so important to the inner like economy, like the energy economy of the community.
Yeah, and I think the Methow Valley has a love for those village witches, like you said. I'm located in a uh, area that has many artists and makers in it. It's a nonprofit called Twisp, and um, across the way from me is a woman who does plant dyeing of material. She's been doing that forever. She's totally a village witch. And then over on the other side is my friend Laura, who does just crazy, amazing screen printing, like plant, animal. I mean, like just straight up witch over there, and is very interested in like queer youth culture, and like wants to cultivate that over there. And I have an illustrator and printmaker next to me, and there's a woodworker. And so there is kind of this place where all of these people have been around and cultivating relationship for such a long time. And when you build relationship with them, you tattoo them, they bring that into the world and that community. I mean, that is one of the things that's really interesting. We'll see if I get to, like, at some point, everybody will have enough tattoos in this community that I won't have enough people, but they keep coming back.
Yeah, I mean, you know how hard it is to cover a body, like that would take like forever.
That's true.
Yeah, and then you'll have like new people coming in, people moving away or leaving in some other way. Like there's always flow. But so your shop is a private studio, I'm assuming?
Yeah, it's a private studio. It started off just like a small chair, and my friend Betania, Lady Ursus is their tagline, who is a traditional skills broom maker. So like literally I am in a broom shop, which is perfect for the witch that I am, and that the space that they've cultivated is like incredibly beautiful. So I have a small corner space back there that I get to use. Yeah.
Okay, so you are with. I'm like trying to imagine this because I'm imagining in a very villagey way now. Like now I can't stop. But it's like a street, like it's like a street, and there's like the different little.
It's a horseshoe. It's like a horseshoe. There's a little green plaza in the middle. It's old Forest Service building that's been refurbished into studios that go along. So like old Forest Service, Washington State old Forest Service buildings are like dark brown, and they have like shingled roofs, and
That's exactly it. That's
yeah,
perfect.
yeah, exactly.
Please send a picture so that
Okay.
this can be visual.
Yes.
I realize that many people, when they listen to podcasts, they like want to go and see what the person looks like and what the
Mm,
space looks like. And so now I'm like, okay, people have told me enough times that they want to see. that I need to put in like more pictures into the episodes.
Okay, I'll try to remember to take some photos of it or send you pictures of from Google what the space looks like. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That is beautiful. So like what's it like to try to publish a tarot deck?
This is the question of the hour. So I've been working on this tarot deck for 5.5 years. It started off just as a project to get me drawing again. I had just finished my master's program in social work at the University of Washington. I was not a witch. I was like a very practical Virgo. I was like so classic, like give me the facts and like astrology, whatever. And then I met Easton, and she just flipped my world. And
How did you meet?
how did me and
Well,
Easton meet? Yeah, yeah.
you guys
We met in 2015, and through the magical portal world of OkCupid at the time. Back when OkCupid, I don't know, was relevant. I don't even know what's going on with OkCupid these days, who's there, but it was great. It felt authentic as a place to meet people. And yeah, she reached out, and the Gemini and the Virgo, we just love talking about ideas, and she's a total cutie and pretty magical. And it was like, yeah, it was probably one of the only times in my life where I really felt like I dated somebody. Like we went on dates, we cultivated dates and like cultivated getting to know each other. And that was super special. And, yeah, and she was like she's like a river mountain nymph. Like maybe I think you've seen her cold plunges. Um
we've like made some contact. Yeah, we like had a little
yeah.
Zoom chat at some point last year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
super
Yeah.
sweet. Yeah. Um and she's used tarot and been interested in astrology for a long time, and so she brought those things into my world. Uh and as I've gotten to know those like tools, those metaphysical tools, the social worker in me and sort of that like practical strategist around like how do we work with the world, it all really makes a lot of sense as archetypal things, that help us feel connected to the collective and seasons and time. So I started drawing this tarot deck, and I just couldn't stop. It just like each piece, it started to evolve from there. And people were really interested in the illustrations, and I finished most of the illustrations about a year ago, and now I'm doing the writing, and that is just like not my energy space. And so it's like fell flat a little bit, but we're working on, Easton's helping me work on publishing at least the cards or getting a test print of the cards in the next month or so. So we're on the path of that. But it's been long.
So is that a self-publishing thing? Did you find somebody to? Okay.
No, yeah, no. Working with a publisher, they get to control so much of it, and you don't actually make a ton of money, but it's a great way to get out there if that's what you're interested in. But no, I'll probably do a Kickstarter or whatever way to raise money for it or interest for it in the next year or so. But becoming a full-time artist was also trying to create space to make this tarot deck happen in the world. But the places where you make money take precedent.
Yeah, no, for sure. This is like your big passion project.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like when this tarot deck comes out, it's like the child that I am going to have, but not the human child. It's like that kind of energy. I feel that for this tarot deck.
I was curious about that when you were talking about the youth, like, so shifting a little bit to a question of children, like I very much was clear that I wasn't going to like birth kids.
Mm-hmm.
I was open to step parenting, and I did get to for a while.
Mm.
But what was your path with it? Like, I think as queers, as like people, as you like, as we get older, like
Mhm.
what's your world around that piece?
Yeah, gosh, such a big question. There was something you said. You said did you say snap parenting or uh,
Step,
step
step,
parenting? Step
step.
parenting. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, definitely very clear and enthusiastically child free. And I think a lot of that comes from working with children most of my life, and seeing the complexity of young people and caring for them. Um, and seeing also the complexity of caring for children and then feeling like there's not enough time or energy for other things in your life. And um, I just, that was not going to be in the stars. And fortunately, Easton's also on that path pretty clearly. So, um, I think down the line, we live in a very small house, but it would be lovely to be able to create a space for young people to land. I helped start a program in the Methow Valley, which is called a host home program. And that is alternative to shelter because in rural communities, it's really hard to sustain shelters for young people or transitional housing. And so you try to work with local community members to open up a room in their house to house a young
Mhm.
person who's in an unstable housing situation. Um, and I think East and I would love to probably do that down the line. But yeah, I think that like I'm digging that village witch, like, maybe moving into like crone, like I have a lot of crones in my life, and I love being the young person in their life that wants to take care of them and like and a lot of them don't have children of their own, and I would love to be the niece, to those aunties.
Mhm.
That feels like a
That's
great
the other
thing.
piece about like the intense urban living. Like, sure, there's neighbors here in this neighborhood and such,
Yeah,
but it's really hard to like, yes, I know some elderly folks, but they live across town, across the bridge. There's a lot of traffic. Like, it's just like not really sustainable. And I would
yeah,
like being in a smaller community, being able to just, I'll walk to your house. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Let me drop you off some soup. Like that type of
yeah.
thing is something that I really wish I had in my life.
Mm-hmm. Do
Um,
you want to move to the Methow Valley? You can come up here.
I mean, Easton and I were talking about getting together to do some cold plunging, some kind of retreat. We did chat about that. That given the hustle, it also feels like so unsurmountable. Like, how do we plan something like that? How do we make it doable for us and for participants?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I have thought about coming to visit y'all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I would love to have more queer community oriented people here. I think that would be amazing. And I think this place is deserving of, and people like you are deserving of being together because, the places like this should not only be accessible to the wealthy class of people in this world. Um, and there's ways that this community is working to make make it more affordable. But yeah, if Easton and I can like support people coming here who want to come here who don't have a lot of access to being in the mountains or being in relationship with rivers or being in relationship with sage step, like that's something we would love to cultivate and help people have access to however we can. Yeah.
I love a community oriented queer village.
Yeah, how I'm so curious, how has the tattoo community been for you in Oakland? Like how do you connect with folks out there?
The tattoo artists here.
Yeah.
My God, any community, especially when it's small, there's just always drama, right?
Mhm.
There's always some.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it's like life ruining or anything, but it can be. And the tattoo industry has shifted so much from being that like old dude, old guard, really masculine, really tough, right, to being much more like how do we like take care of our clients' needs across the board, not just their actual tattoo needs. Like
Yeah.
we have blankets in the shop and tea and like music and candles and right, like shifting from
Mm-hmm.
you're a piece of skin with a wallet to like, and I was never in that environment. So I, but I remember being in my first shop, which was an all women, all queer shop,
Mm-hmm.
and hearing, like going on a date with some like random woman who was like all tough and like tied it up and super butch, and her being like, oh, those, yeah, the reputation of Black and blue in the community is like you're just like a bunch of little soft girls who like do little soft little cutesy tattoos. And I was like, fuck you. Like, we're on a date. Okay, clearly you're not interested in getting in my pants. That's fine.
Yeah. Because that's not the way it's going to happen.
Like, way to insult the like queer women owned and operated shop in the Bay, like the oldest
Totally.
queer women operated shop. Cool. But so it was like very much like that. There's a lot of competition. Then the dudes started to resent the queers for like taking clientele because people were like, oh, I can have a good tattoo and be treated nicely. Like, cool. And so over time, there's just like more and more and more of this type of shop, right? Really like client experience forward shop, which creates competition and like scarcity mindsets. And there's so many of us here, and people keep pumping out apprentices like by the dozen every year. So there's some scarcity for sure. And I think this podcast is helping people make connections, me with them and them with me, and sometimes across the board. I've talked to a bunch of folks now that are lovely. And I know that people are generally lovely, but you just have to like talk to them, like, take away the, like, we're each other's competition, we're each other's, that we should, kind of, I think there's an energetic sense of that, even if people wouldn't admit to it. Competition between shops and, who's got the whatever type of perk or whatever type of reputation or following or stars on Yelp or whatever,
Yeah.
So like literally talking to people is helpful. And I'm also trying to talk to people, not just here, but in other places, and kind of like interviewing whoever is interesting. And that's part of the point of the podcast,
I just really appreciate that. I think having forums where people can talk candidly and then share their experiences, and getting to listen to folks, like I was listening to one of your episodes about like trauma informed tattooing and that person's experience and how they approach trauma work with their clients. And as a community social worker, that's definitely something I'm working with, and also struggling or trying to figure out how that fits, and so it's really neat to just hear other people kind of exploring what are the edges of boundaries that they use and how they approach that work with clients. Not just the practicality of tattooing, but like the containers that we create for people to come in and to have this experience with us, or like listening to you talk about not wanting to take tips anymore. And I was like, oh yeah, I've felt this way actually for a long time. I don't want to do that anymore. Like, yeah, I'll just get paid what I want to get paid.
And I'm glad that inspired you.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, definitely. So these like candid spaces of talking about how we approach things, as opposed to, I think, some of our, like the culture in tattooing that I've seen sort of separate from more of the client focused oriented tattooers and into the like celebrity tattoo spaces, is like very much about how do I judge other people who are doing these things that I don't agree with, and like put them on blast or be really passive aggressive about how they're tattooing, how they came up, what they're doing wrong. Stuff like that. Cause they can get clients no matter what. They're just like, they have millions of followers, so they don't really care, but I just don't identify with that at all.
Yeah. My priority is kind of to like, because I can be very judgy and I don't want to be like, I don't want to spend my energy that way, And so I had this little interaction with somebody on Threads who said, this young woman, she's like in her early mid 20s, and she said, uh, who recommend new glides to me. Like, what are people using? I want new glides. And
Mm,
I was like, Aquaphor? Like, why aren't, like, I just was like, what about Aquaphor? I've been using it for 15 years. It's working just fine. And
uh-huh.
hers was like, oh my God, no, I would never use Aquaphor.
Interesting. Yeah.
But then was like, well, why? Like, I was curious. I was like, why
Yeah.
not? And I thought about it and just blocked her because I was like, I don't actually care and I don't actually
Mm,
want to her energy around. Oh my God, I would never use Aquaphor. Like,
mm.
oh.
Yeah.
And like as somebody who will get into like random ass fights online for good and bad reasons, I was like,
Mm,
no, nope, nope.
mm, mm-mm. Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of, I think there is that kind of tension that we see, particularly at moments of time where industry or culture shifts, where we're like, why am I holding on to this thing? Like, and, or why isn't this thing staying? And younger generations will push and say, like, why are we keeping that thing? But also, why not keep that thing? Like, whatever that is, whether it's Aquaphor or a particular glide, or as we, moving into cartridges, or it's like fine line or a disappearing ink, whatever the fuck is happening out there.
Yeah.
And I think part of a healthy industry shift is when people say, like, I want to give what I know freely, like my information, because the truth is somebody had to give it to me also. And so, like, let's create an economy where we give freely. And we know that in an economy, when we have compassion and collective investment in each other, everybody thrives. Or those people that aren't able to carry on in it, it's not because the community didn't support them and say, like, you're talented enough to do this.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I do think that one thing I feel really grateful for is coming into this industry at this particular time where the people I follow, the artists I follow, are so considerate, are so interested in consent, are really like explorative about how to do things well, how to treat skin as like a living, like, active part of a human, like an organ that is like deserving of so much like care and tenderness and like healing. And so I feel really grateful because when I was interested in tattooing like 10 years ago and was getting tattoos, I was like, there's no fucking way I want to be a part of this. Like, and I couldn't get into it. Like, I would have to work so hard and work for free, and that just didn't feel like something I could do. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, so there's always that tension point, I think, in culture shift, and I'm really interested in like moving in the direction where we're like seeing this as something that's not just about a capitalist economy where only the like the most brutal people survive.
Yeah. Yeah. It, as we're moving towards a more gentle way of being with each other, there's also a move towards more brutal ways of being with each other on the other end of
Mm,
this. Clearly, we see that in Gaza, in Israel. Like, it's
mm-hmm,
it's hard to hold all of it, right? Like on many levels the world is a better place for humans, and then we're so like facing every day the
mm,
brutality that's happening too. But if you
mm.
look at like numbers, there's more women getting educations, there's more babies surviving, like across the world. Life overall, according to numbers, is gentler, but it's really hard to believe that, like,
Yeah.
when you're on social media and you see what's happening in Gaza.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. I was curious. One question I had for you was, um, and I wonder if you're seeing this with other artists, but I I think one of the challenges of being a self-promoting small business, small artist is like always thinking about the presentation of what, who you are and how you are in the world. And it's just never felt like an option to me to not talk about or speak about the things that I care deeply for. But it's such a different frame now that I'm like, oh, if I talk about this thing or I share this thing, like how does that interact with my bookings? Like fucking, I'm like, damn, I really want to talk about Gaza right now, but also my books are open. Hey. And so like there's this very interesting challenge, I think, in being active and responsive to what's happening in the world and being a small business owner. And I'm curious if you've had to navigate that at all with clients or in community. It's like,
Yeah, it's a great question. First of all, do what's best for your survival because you are who you are in the world, right? Like that's my unasked for advice. If posting about Gaza is
yeah.
interfering with your ability to make a living, like don't post about Gaza. Like actually, Israel does not give a shit how much we post about Gaza. Like I get that people in Gaza are asking people to post, but clearly
Mm-hmm.
it's not helping.
Mm-hmm.
And on like a personal level, when I've posted about Gaza, I have close friends I grew up with who live in Israel because I immigrated here from Russia, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I come from a community of Russian Jews who could not stay in Russia, could not survive in Russia, some of whom are queer, and for whom the only place to go was Israel.
Mm.
And what they see there, how they're inundated there with information is very different. So when I've
Very
posted
different.
things about Gaza, I have gotten responses from my people that I grew up with being like, you are really hurting me right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, like not hurting them is more important than screaming about Gaza along with everybody else screaming about Gaza because we're all
Mm.
doing it in different ways, right? Like there has not been a day I haven't thought about it or like deeply been depressed about it, but I'm also not screaming about it online because
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't feel right to me
Yeah.
for these reasons that I just mentioned.
Yeah.
But in general, I think we should be who we are across the board in everything we do. So the complexity of that is true for me. And so I'm not going to be talking that much. I still do a little bit, but I'm not going to be talking that much about Gaza on my socials.
Mm-hmm.
But like, when my intake form includes, it's included different versions of this. Currently what it includes, it says, my business, I'm striving to make my business anti-racist and, such,
Mm-hmm.
human being first, whole human first. So because of my and other people's marginalized identities, I ask that you like sign here to basically state that you are of similar politics. I wish not to sit with people who believe different things. Basically, ask people to
Mm.
just initial that. It used to say, basically, if you voted for Trump, abort this mission. um, and it said, please tell me a bit about your anti-racist journey and where
Mm.
you're at with it. Like I've
Mm-hmm.
asked things across different years, depending on what was happening in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
currently, I'm just like, just acknowledge that you're kind of on the same page with me, more or less. Like, I don't need anything else from you because I would ask, tell me about your anti racism journey. And people would write me a novel. And I'd be like, actually, don't want that. I really just want you to acknowledge that,
Mm-hmm.
because what's happened is that I've tattooed people by accident early on that were, um, like I think I threw this guy accidentally who was like maybe a KKK member. I don't know, like because people would come into the shop without disclosing anything, right? And then later I'd be like, "What? Like, who is this person?" They were really strange. Being with them was strange. The energy was not good. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. I don't want to give my energy to people who I wouldn't want to have tea with.
Mm-hmm.
So I started asking very directly, and I also got the feedback that some people I knew who would be like, oh, yeah, my ex boyfriend wanted to get tattooed by you, but then he looked at your intake form and was like, no, thank you. And I was like, I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
touch.
You don't want to. Yeah.
I have like too many questions. I want to know too much about your politics. They must not be that great
Mm-hmm.
politics.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a line, and I feel privileged in that I live in the Bay Area. So most people are going to kind of more or less agree with me on where I stand on things. And
Mm-hmm.
I have enough people wanting to be tattooed by me that the people who don't want to be tattooed by me don't really make a difference. So
Yeah.
all those things are true for me specifically. If I lived somewhere where could barely get enough work to survive, I would probably drop all that shit and just deal.
Mm,
Like, we
yeah.
all have to make a living, and I'd put that energy towards something else, right? If I can donate more money over here from some asshole that I had to tattoo, I would still not
Mhm.
tattoo imagery. I wasn't like, if I don't want to
Right.
tattoo an image, I won't tattoo it. But as far as people go, I can kind of like, I can see like sometimes you have to give a little and take a little.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
For it's definitely interesting here. We're in a county that's probably like maybe 65-35. So it's 65 conservative percent, 35
Mhm.
progressive liberal, more on the like democratic side of things because we have an older population. Have a lot of kind of like libertarian, sort of also not engaged in politic people at all out here. Like when you
Mhm.
look at the voting percentages, it's real small. Um, I think for me, one thing that I'll do is just like be very clear about my values. Like on Instagram, I just am like clear about my values. And then people can kind of decide whether or not they want to be tattooed by me. And I would say, maybe 20% of the people that I've tattooed in terms of our politics or values might be not necessarily disaligned, but not like congruent. And
Mhm.
and that has been something interesting about being out here, which is living in close proximity to a lot of different people, particularly like class background. So like access to information, so different, access to even contact with different kinds of people, so different. Um, and something that feels important to explore in this kind of community is like, what does it mean to live in community with people whose values are dramatically different than yours, but who also have values that are incredibly aligned with yours? And like, what is a value? Is politics the only value that we hold? Our ideology is the only values that we hold? Um, and I mean, that's a tension point. I don't think I have an answer for that necessarily, but I do think my position in Seattle, I think, would be pretty similar. I'd be like, fuck you if you voted for Trump. And honestly, here, I'd probably tattoo somebody who voted for Trump.
Mhm.
But they would have to choose me. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
trying to like get that many people. But I think it would be an interesting conversation. And I'm kind of interested here in having conversations with people across division, because the full circle back to Gaza and Israel is like, are we really that far off from being where they're at in this country with the kinds of ideological positions that we have of hurt and pain and trauma? And uh, it is a fine line when we tip into a place where we believe that the extinction of another person or another community of people would help us feel better and safer. And,
Mhm.
um, we're at some of those crossroads, and I'm like, I don't want to be killed by you. Like, I don't, like, literally, like, I just don't, I want to live, and I want you, and I want my people to live. And so, how do we do that in a way where you can see my humanity and my connection because I'm willing to engage with yours enough?
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes
Yeah,
easier than others, but this is a really unique community in that conversation feels possible more than I've felt in other places.
that's good to hear. I mean, the complexity of that is kind of where we need to be. I think, like, I kind of hate to be like, we have to engage with difference, but what choice do we have? And the
Yeah.
choice here is false. Like, I live in a bubble. And, it's like, as much as I can, like, self-righteously go, I don't tattoo people who are not, way, way, way left. Like, that's only comfortable for me, like, it
Mm,
makes my life easier,
mhm,
but does that make any difference to the world? And
mm,
that's also,
mm.
yeah, it's as I get older, those are the questions that I struggle with more, and like
Yeah.
where my tolerance for difference actually becomes bigger, right? Because I feel like that is a sign of maturity, is
Mm-hmm.
regarding difference with not having it mean something about you is a point of growth. Like that
Yeah.
was something I was able to really hold as a 20 something year old. But
Yeah.
now, um, yeah. So those
Mm,
are all really good questions. And I
mm.
have, I mean, deep respect for you to, to be able to work with people and regard difference with possibility and like not, not have it mean something about like who you are or like what you must do or how you must defend a certain thing or because yeah,
Hmm.
like people respond to being yelled at really.
Turns out it does. It does. And I mean, some of it is just incredibly practical because, like, those are the people that have guns in my community. Those are the people that have guns. And those are the people that also have the tractors that you need when you need to like move some shit around. And so there's also this like practical way of perceiving the fact that I think when you get older, you also recognize what it takes to live. And that means being in relationship enough with people who have some of the things that you need to live well and that you want to be a part of a culture and an economy where we share and we rely on each other in those places. And if I'm adamant that you are wrong and bad, why would you want to come work on my road?
Right. And if you are, if they have a teenage kid who's struggling and you give them a tarot reading and help them get out of their deep hole, right, then they're like, oh, those two dykes over there are actually really great people. And if
Totally.
somebody questions them, I'm gonna take my gun and defend them,
Yeah.
because like liberals without guns or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation. But yeah.
Sorry to put the label of dykes on you. I don't know if you identify that way, but
No, I actually, yeah, dykes have definitely been something that we identify with for sure.
well,
Yeah.
hey. See, like I'm like at a point in my life where I'm like, I want to go rural and I want to be both the dyke with the tarot cards, but also the dude with the gun. I want to do both.
You can, so I think Mike, it might be time. I think you got to come up here.
Training first, and convince my partner that she can be like, I don't know. She has another partner who is very set on living here in California. They've been together for like 20 years, so
Mm,
I don't know where we're gonna end up with this
hmm.
conversation. I'm
Yeah.
definitely looking,
Yeah. I mean, this place is really interesting in that it is rural and there are a lot of dikes. And and I feel safe. I mean, I feel mostly safe in this place. Like we've had people come and, a bunch of guys work on a patio and I'm not sure like where they stand. And then they're like totally the nicest guys out there. And it just like it does a little bit of like flipping in your mind of like, yeah, you probably didn't vote for the guy I voted for, but you're so welcoming and like you show up for your family, you show up for community in a different way, but you do show up.
Mhm.
And I think to some extent, like you were saying, like the smallness of community, like queer community can also be so horrible to each other. Like
Yeah, for sure.
my values don't align with a lot of the things that like some people in my queer community, both in Seattle and a little bit here in the younger queer community, do and how they are. So um, sometimes it's not just like particular identity markers that allow us to see values alignment.
For sure. There
Yeah.
was a meme I saw today that was like a picture of this like white man with a mullet, and it said, "This man could be like the most racist, like gun-toting Republican, or he could be a pansexual hipster." Like, the word was he could be a pansexual communist.
Totally. Yeah, there's times when I'm where it is like really interesting. I've had to be at school board meetings where people are like really adamantly against sexual health in our schools, like comprehensive sexual health in our schools. And, you see the table and people kind of start sitting down, and I'm like, oh, okay, these people will be aligned with us. Like, I can tell because you're wearing a Patagonia jacket. And then they're not. And you're like, what? Like,
Is
ah.
that
Or like the old guy with the cowboy hat is like totally on board. It's just like, oh, yeah,
I
warping.
can't make assumptions, I
Can't make
guess.
assumptions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's been lovely.
Same.
And I'm always like, God, it's like feels so abrupt to be like, okay, like we need to finish up. But
That's okay.
give me like a very small thing that's been making you happy lately.
A small thing that's been making me happy. Okay, I'll just share this because it's goofy. But our cat, Sheetal, she's like the love of my life. She's like my best friend. Easton had her before me, and then we built this really beautiful relationship with each other. And recently, she's been peeing outside of her box, and it's been very distressing to both Easton and I. We were like even calling the vet to be like, is this normal? Like, should we be worried she's got like a cognitive thing? She's even pooping outside of her box too, which is like really weird, and it's a mess, and it's very stressful. But yesterday, Easton and I built like a mega cat litter box out of a plastic container, and it's got like a little handle thing, and it goes in the side. And she's been using her box really regularly, and just like every time she gets in that box, I'm like, she told, like, how was that? She's like, it was great. She comes out, she peed inside the box, there's no pee on the floor. And so that's the little thing that's making me happy.
I mean, that's a great thing and like so nice for everybody involved. You're not worried about her brain
Everyone.
function. You're not worried about your floor. It's great.
It's great. Totally.
Her name
um,
is Sheetal. Is it like a? It's like sounds like a Yiddish name.
oh yeah, it comes from I don't know actually specific. I can't remember the language specifically in India, but Shishi, which actually means dirty, but Easton met a cat named Shishi in India, and she had an untimely death, but then she met this other cat, Sheetal, and she kind of changed the name a little bit. So Sheetal is her name.
Okay,
Yeah.
cute. Love it.
Thanks so much, Micah. It was a delight getting to meet you, and I'm just like really impressed with your engagement in community with tattooing, and having these conversations with people. It's really special. Thank you.
You are so kind. Thank you. I also it's like so fun to get to actually talk to you about all of our values that I think are just like we don't talk about enough.
Mm-hmm.
Community oriented values, and yeah, I really appreciate your time. Thank you.